everyone. I am back with our Sunday Bible class stuff, and you can do the lesson, watch the videos whenever you're wanting to, but they're designed for Sunday Bible class. So we looked at Rebecca last week, and I love that story and how she's so brave and trusting God about going to meet and marry this guy who she's never laid eyes on before, even though he is a relative of hers. So there's that. But she's very trusting. And so I read through the next few chapters, and there's a whole lot there, guys. Rebecca and Isaac, of course, get married. They have twins, Jacob and Esau. You probably remember that. And I really encourage you and your parents to read together in the Bible or in a children's Bible together to see all those amazing stories that come with Jacob and Esau. Lots of cool stuff. And then we have stories about Jacob, and it's time for him to get married, and he goes back to Rebecca's brother, Laban, and meets his daughters, Rachel and Leah, and he falls in love with Rachel, but he actually marries both of them, which is just a different thing from Bible times that sometimes happened in those stories. But Jacob's sons is what we're looking at today. Okay, so that took me that long to get to this point. That's why I'm encouraging you to go through and read some of that stuff about Isaac and Rebecca and Jacob and Esau, because we are coming to Joseph. And Joseph is one of my favorite Bible people. We even named our little boy Joseph after him. So let's read in Genesis. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 37. And it's a lot of reading, you guys, to get us kind of up to speed. So hang with me. I'm going to skip some, and I'll try to tell you when I'm skipping so that you can keep up with the reading. Okay? Genesis 37. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. Remember, that's Joseph's father, Jacob. This is the account of Jacob. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers. Now, Israel, which is another name for Jacob, which is also something that we missed in the previous chapters where God called him Israel instead of Jacob. He loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. A little shady, right? Because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made a richly ornamented robe for him. So there's his robe, or what we often call Joseph's coat of many colors, and we know that it makes his brothers really jealous, right? It says in verse 4, when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Do you ever have days like that with your brothers or sisters where maybe you don't even mean to, but you just cannot even speak a kind word to them? And your parents might say, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Verse 5, Joseph had a dream. Remember this part? And he told it to his brothers, and they hated him all the more. So here's the dreams. He said to them, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. Here's a picture from our children's Bible about that dream. And so you can tell it makes them very unhappy. His brothers said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Basically, he's saying, like, y'all are going to bow down to me. That was what my dream was. What? I'm innocent. That was my dream. His brothers, okay, then he had another dream. So that's not going to make it much better, is it? Similar idea. He says in verse 9, I had another dream this time. The sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father actually rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. His father's like, maybe this is from God, and maybe there's something to this. Verse 12. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I'm going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived, a man found him wandering around. The man shows him where the brothers have moved their flocks to. So we're skipping to verse 18. But the brothers saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here's the picture in the Children's Bible of Joseph with his robe on. And then here's where they're seeing him coming, and they're plotting to kill him. Okay? So it says this. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." Pretty brutal, right? Like, let's kill him. They were truly sick of him and angry and jealous. When Reuben heard this in verse 21, he's the oldest of the brothers. He tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed blood. Throw him in the cistern here in the desert, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. Reuben is a little bit wiser here. He knows that it's going to break Jacob's heart if anything happens to his favorite Joseph. So verse 23, when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe. He was wearing it, the richly ornamented robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him in the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. So then they sit down to eat. Well, they're just going to have their lunch while their brother suffers in the well thing, right, this pit. They saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." Now they're thinking that way. His brothers agreed. What they basically see is like, we can make some money off of him if he's alive. Not good, right? So his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. So they've just sold him as a slave, their own little brother. Verse 29, when Reuben returned to the cistern, apparently he wasn't there during this part, saw that Joseph was not there. He tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" He's very upset because he realizes what they've done is a bad move. Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, dipped the robe in the goat blood, and then they took it back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see if it is your son's robe." They knew it was his son's robe, right? And basically are tricking him. So Jacob recognized and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." You can imagine the heartbreak there. He mourned for his son for many days. Many came down to comfort him, but he said no. He just needed to cry about it. He was very upset. Verse 36, meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Okay, so now we're on to the part where Joseph is with Potiphar, and we skip actually to chapter 39 of Genesis, and I'm just going to read a shortened part of this. Here's a couple of pictures for you. There's where he's down in the cistern, or kind of like a well pit kind of thing, and then there's an image of him being sold as a slave. All right, so at Potiphar's house, things are actually good. It says, Joseph had been taken to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian, was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. He bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. And we're in Genesis 39, verse 2 now. The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered. That means he had success. Even as a slave, the Lord made him prosper. He lived in the house with his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. I mean, this is a rich guy. And so that's a big compliment to be put in charge of everything he owns. Um, what a testimony to Potiphar to see that all these good things come to Joseph, and Joseph knows it's from God. And so Potiphar is like, oh, well, your God is awesome. He's blessing you. So I'm going to put you in charge and hope that he blesses me too. It says, verse 5, from the time he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So he left in Joseph's care everything he had with Joseph in charge. He didn't worry about anything. He did not concern himself with anything except what he was going to have for dinner, the food he ate. Things were going really good. And even though it started out as bad, sold as a slave, you can imagine Joseph was probably like, what am I going to do? Did you just desert me, God? We don't know. We don't know what he was thinking or anything. We just know what it says there in the Bible. But we do know that God was with him, and he was making everything Joseph touched prosper, to the point that this Egyptian, who probably didn't believe in our one true God, who probably had a lot of gods that he worshiped, false gods, sees this and is like, okay, there's some power here. There's some serious power here, and I'm going to trust you, Joseph, because your God is awesome. So that's pretty cool. And then something negative is about to happen to Joseph in Potiphar's house. Some of you probably remember this part of the story too. I'm going to show you a picture. We're not going to read this part in detail. For some of our younger kids, it might be a little much, but if you're in upper elementary school, to ask your parents about this, ask them to read it with you in chapter 39 of Genesis and kind of see what happens. The real bottom line here comes out in our children's Bible, so we're just going to kind of summarize what happens here. Everything was going great for Joseph until one day. Here's Joseph back here. There's Potiphar, the master of the house. One day, Potiphar's wife tried to trick him. She told lies about Joseph. She actually tried to get Joseph to do some bad things. And guess what? You think Joseph was going to be swayed to do some dishonest things with her? He was not. He was firm that he was going to trust in God and do what was right. But unfortunately, the hard part is Potiphar believed his wife. And what happened because of that? Joseph was put in jail. Do you think God, once Joseph got put in jail, God disappeared and said, sorry, kid, I'm not helping you anymore? You think so? Probably not, right? We know that while Joseph was in prison, in Genesis, I'm switching back to the Bible, Genesis 39, verse 20 says, but while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So, guess what? The guy that's in charge of the prison warden, puts Joseph in charge of everybody in the prison. Something about Joseph, right? Or something about his God that makes people trust Joseph and know that things are going to go well in Joseph's hands. So it says, put Joseph in charge of all in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. Here he is. He's in charge of the prison now. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. So while it doesn't tell us what Joseph is thinking, if Joseph is like, we don't know if he's up and down on the roller coaster of faith. It doesn't seem like he's going down too much, does it? It had to be hard when he refused to do what Potiphar's wife wanted and be dishonest, when he stuck to his guns and said, no, that's not what I'm going to do. It's not what God would have me do. I need to be honest and truthful. And yet he still got put in jail. That had to be hard, right? So maybe he did hit some lows, but we don't know. What we do know is God blesses him. And so we know that there's a level of faith and trust that Joseph has there. That God keeps blessing him, keeps letting him be the one that gets put in charge of all this stuff. It's pretty cool. God, remember what he told Abraham? I am your shield, your very great reward. Is Joseph being shielded? He's being shielded by God. From the time he had the dreams about his brothers to them throwing him in the pit, from them sparing his life but deciding to sell him as a slave, to going to Potiphar's house as a slave, and then rising to be put in charge, to falling again to be put in jail for nothing that he did wrong, and then becoming in charge of the jail. God is shielding him. And I am your very great reward. Is he rewarding Joseph for this trust and his righteousness? He is. Will he do that for us too? Yeah, it's a promise. He will. He's shielding us. He is looking for our trust and our faith so that he can reward us for our obedience. All right, guys, it was a long one, I know. Thanks for hanging with me. Have a great week. Bye.